At some point in your life, I'm sure you've heard the phrase the calm before the storm. Unfortunately, for content creators and fantasy football managers alike, no such thing exists in the NFL. The NFL preseason is more like the storm before the storm. For weeks leading up to the NFL season, our rankings get shuffled like a deck of cards as we react to depth chart drama and starter snap counts. In today's video, I'll try to cut through some of the noise regarding fantasy football's most volatile player group, rookies.
What? What?
Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
All right, if you're ready to get serious and win your fantasy football league this year, it is time to sign up for a plan at fantasypoints.com/plans and use my promo code PURE10 for 10% off. The NFL standard package comes with weekly and season-long projections, dynasty rankings, waiver wire advice, and more. Or you can go right to the source with the Fantasy Points data suite, which has dozens of useful metrics and extremely powerful filtering capabilities to help you find exactly what you're looking for. So again, that is fantasypoints.com/plans and use my promo code PURE10 for 10% off. Now let's talk about some rookies. And I'd like to start with, I think, the most relevant rookie right now in Dynasty, which is Drake May. Drake May has stuck out to me as perhaps the most underpriced player in all of Dynasty this offseason. Right now, over the past month, his startup ADP is in the 6th round as the quarterback 18. Despite going just 2 picks after Caleb Williams in the NFL draft, he goes over 4 rounds after him in Dynasty startups. And while I think we can all agree that Caleb was the better prospect, he's stepping into a better situation, that type of a gap is just not justified. And I found that to be very exploitable. But with recent news about Drake May, I think it's really time to push the chips in and try to acquire him before it's too late. Drake May played well against the Eagles in preseason week 2. Not that his stats were super flashy. He went 6 for 11, 47 passing yards, but there was a nice deep throw to Javon Baker that was dropped. And he also added 15 rushing yards and a rushing touchdown in that game, flashing some of that mobility that he was known for in college. But the bigger thing for me is recent comments from Gerard Mayo, because the general consensus around Drake May this whole offseason has been that he's going to start the season on the bench. Jacoby Brissett is going to be the unchallenged week 1 starter, and he might even play, up to half the season, more than half the season. That the Patriots want to slow play things with Drake May. Recent comments suggest otherwise. I don't know if this is because of how May has played in the preseason, how he's been in practice, but according to an article from Mike Reese on August 16th, Gerard Mayo recently said that May has definitely taken a step forward and that the starting competition is definitely not over. So the way I see it, I still think Jacoby Brissett starts week 1, but the fact that we're already getting these comments in mid-August tells me that Drake May is going to play a lot sooner than we think. Remember, this is supposed to be one of the worst teams in the NFL. If they're already considering May, I think they're definitely turning to him early in the year, especially if they start like 0-3, 0-4. So, the sooner he gets on the field, the sooner he can demonstrate his talent. I think people have forgotten that he was a good prospect in his own right. And he's also very mobile. I think he's going to be a fantasy friendly quarterback. So again, this is like my number 1 trade target in all of Dynasty right now. And I think it's very relevant as we head into preseason week 3. Meanwhile, Drake May's teammate, Jalen Polk, fellow rookie drafted in the top of the 2nd round, he's already locked up a starting spot. It's not that the competition was extremely steep in New England, right? It's Tyquan Thornton, it's KJ Osborne, but the fact that he's definitely not playing behind those guys, that he's already established his role in this offense, that's a good thing. That's what you want to see, especially because a lot of analysts and scouts kind of touted Polk as a pro-ready wide receiver. So it's good to see that that's true at least. And I think he's been a nice value in the late 2nd round of rookie drafts this offseason. This is exactly what you want to see if you have drafted Jalen Polk. And there's reason for optimism with some other rookies around the league as well. One of those guys is Xavier Worthy. There was already plenty of hype around him as a 1st-round wide receiver playing with Patrick Mahomes. Definitely was excitement around Xavier Worthy, but that has gone to another level after preseason week 2. He had a good game against the Lions. He caught 3 passes for 62 yards and a touchdown. And even beyond the box score, I think the utilization for Xavier Worthy was even more encouraging. So, according to Dwayne McFarland, who's been writing up all of the preseason utilization stuff over at fantasylife.com, he says Xavier Worthy has a 25% target share with Mahomes in 2 preseason games. The rookie speedster is working the opposite areas of the field from Rice with a 20.8 ADOT, leading the team with a 68% air yard share. Worthy's 89% route participation might be slightly inflated with Hollywood Brown out of the lineup, but the rookie is making the most of his opportunities. So Worthy's running with the starters. He's making splash plays. Should that change our outlook on him? I mean, I think it's encouraging. I think you have to be happy that he's getting this type of a role early on because remember, we liked Sky Moore. Some of us, I liked Sky Moore coming out. I was obviously very wrong, but his rookie season, I mean, he could barely get on the field. We know why now, right? But he couldn't get on the field much as a rookie. And then even Rashi Rice, who turned out to have an incredibly strong second half of the season last year, even he started out in a part-time role. He was battling to take routes away from Justin Watson and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. So the fact that they're not messing around with Xavier Worthy. He is already one of their starters. He's going to be on the field in 11 personnel from the jump. He might even be the number 2 wide receiver. We don't know because Hollywood Brown's not healthy, but that has to be a sign of encouragement if you draft Xavier Worthy. Now, I still think there are some limitations to Worthy's game, mostly related to his size, but we're not expecting him to see a lot of press coverage in this creative Andy Reid offense, especially with the other weapons there. They're going to get him some creative usage. So I'm not really too worried about that. His skill set is obviously a great fit with Patrick Mahomes. And if he has a few big games to start the season, he could have a massive jump in dynasty value. So there's a lot of upside to holding Xavier Worthy right now. I'd still be willing to shop him in Dynasty, though. It's never fun to trade away a rookie before they ever play a game, but it can be profitable. When other managers are willing to value players as if they've already broken out, that mitigates a lot of downside risk for you. And I've seen some recent trades of Xavier Worthy that would imply, those types of returns are out there. Not in every league, which is why I wouldn't call him a must sell. I just think he's a must shop player. I think that's maybe a better term for it. I think if you have him, it's just the responsible thing to do is do your due diligence, just see what's out there. Because if there's some crazed fan in your league that wants to pay way more than he's worth, you should trade him, right? Like a couple trades I pulled from dynastydaddy.com's trade database, Xavier Worthy and Josh Jacobs for AJ Brown, Xavier Worthy and 2 seconds for Malik Neighbors, Xavier Worthy, J.K. Dobbins, and a first for Kyler Murray. These are all smashes to me. These are all easy trades to send away Xavier Worthy. So I think he's a must shop player. I think Caleb Williams is in that same category. Just there are people ready to do irresponsible things based on some preseason highlights. Do I think these are bad players? Absolutely not. But when you have the opportunity to kind of take away all the downside by just cashing in for known commodities or better players, I think you might as well look into it. Now, Keon Coleman is a rookie whose week 2 performance didn't really turn a lot of heads. He had 3 targets, he had 1 reception for 12 yards. So nobody's rushing out to overpay for Keon Coleman in Dynasty at this moment. But one thing you might have missed is that Keon Coleman has established himself as a full-time starter for this offense. This is also from Dwayne McFarland's article. Keon Coleman registered his second consecutive 100% route participation mark with the starters over the first 5 drives. He remained in the game for 2 additional drives and ended the night with 1 reception for 12 yards on 3 targets. Coleman's game comes with concerns, but it appears the Bills are going to get him on the field a lot, and that is hard to ignore when your quarterback is Josh Allen. So Mac Hollins returned for the second preseason game. It didn't matter. Keon Coleman just didn't come off the field when the starters were playing. That is a very good sign for him, even though he didn't do a lot, obviously. But you want your rookie wide receiver running a lot of routes, and you want them playing with a great quarterback. So that's the setup that Coleman has. Doesn't prevent him from being a bust. I still have concerns about his prospect profile, but that is undoubtedly a good sign that he's at least not buried behind Mac Hollins or Marquez Valdez-Scantling or anybody like that. Now, I personally would still be very comfortable cashing out Keon Coleman for a future first. So if that's on the table, I'm taking it. But there's certainly a lot of upside here, just given the offensive context. Of course, there are other rookies that are taking a little bit longer to make their presence felt. And this happens every year, right? We saw last year, Devon Achane, a healthy scratch in week 1, goes on to have a 50-point game, very valuable dynasty asset at this point. But that doesn't mean that dynasty managers are going to react reasonably to these slow starts. One rookie off to a slow start is Trey Benson, rookie running back for the Cardinals. I don't know what people necessarily expected. He's the clear backup to James Conner, which I think is was the most likely outcome all along. James Conner was actually quite good last season. Trey Benson was a third round pick. That's not a massive investment, right? Rashad White was a third round pick. He played back up to Leonard Fournette for most of his rookie season. So it shouldn't come as much of a shock that Trey Benson is not yet a starter or a co starter with James Conner. But he does look like the clear handcuffed. McFarland notes in his article, same one from fantasylife.com, that Benson played 65% of the offensive snaps over the team's first 4 drives in preseason week 2, and that he handled 82% of the pass attempts. So it seems to me like, as far as carrying the ball, he's the clear backup. Michael Carter and Amari DiMarcado are battling for more of like a satellite role, perhaps a third down role. But Benson is the guy when it comes to the early down stuff behind James Conner. As far as I'm concerned, he's right on track. He has strong contingent value right away on what should be a very good offense. He's going to have a chance to inherit this backfield as soon as next season. James Conner turns 30 in May. They drafted Trey Benson for a reason. If he continues to develop, I won't be surprised if heading into next year, they're ready to turn the keys over to him. I have a little bit more concern about Xavier Legette, mostly just because he hasn't been on the field. He's been dealing with an injury. He hasn't gotten to play in any of the preseason games. And the vibes are just admittedly not good with Legette right now. He hasn't been able to separate himself from known awful receivers, Jonathan Mingo and Terrace Marshall. That's a concern. However, I still want to preach a little bit of patience here. He is a first round wide receiver, and he is going to run a lot of routes this season. Because Mingo and Marshall are so bad, they're going to get Legette on the field and let him run a lot of routes this season. So we're going to find out one way or the other whether he can play. And at his cost, right, his value on fantasy calc right now, wide receiver 52, he's valued alongside players like Romeo Dobbs, Dallas Goedert, and Jalen Wright. I think he has a lot of value upside at that price. And I'd be more inclined to buy him at that cost than to try to jump ship right now. And then the third rookie I'd like to touch on as far as having a slow start is Ben Sinnott. Despite being the second tight end drafted in this year's class, he is currently listed third on his own team's depth chart behind 33-year-old Zach Ertz and a player you've probably never heard of named John Bates, who has a whopping 53 receptions across his first 3 years in the NFL. You should not be worried about this. I don't know how many people are worried about this, but when the season starts, if Sinnott is having some slow games, some quiet games, I do think people are going to get a little bit antsy, especially after what we saw from Michael Mayer last year, where he got the high draft capital and never really panned out. So I do think that people will get worried, and you should be prepared to pounce on any buying opportunity that might arise. He has the draft capital, he has the athleticism, he's already flashed his big playability, had a 44-yard reception in preseason week 1. This team is in desperate need of playmakers. Outside of Terry McLaurin, there's just nobody to make big plays for this team. So I think he's going to get his shot sooner than later. And finally, let's close this thing out with a few day 3 rookies that you need to be stashing on your dynasty roster. If any of these guys are available in any of your leagues, I'd be willing to make a pretty, handsome bid to add them to my roster, stash them on the taxi squad, and just see what happens. The first of these players is Jordan Whittington, who is a 6th round pick out of Texas, goes to the Rams, and he's been making some noise in practice. He backed it up in preseason week 2. Now, the Rams don't ever play any of their main guys in preseason, so it's not like he was competing with anyone, but he was the clear dominant force in preseason week 2. He had 8 targets in his playing time, I think 5 receptions, something like a 29% target share when he was on the field. His college profile was not impressive, hence the 6th round draft capital, but at least you can sort of justify it by saying he played in a crowded offense with Xavier Worthy, Adonai Mitchell, Jatavian Sanders, Jonathan Brooks, Bijan Robinson. I don't think the guy's a star. I don't think he's the next Puka Nacua, but McVay is a good offensive mind. And I think Whittington could push Demarcus Robinson for that wide receiver 3 job, which would give him some contingent value if Puka or Kupp were to miss any time. Next, we have Brenden Rice, who was a 7th round pick to the Chargers. He played with Caleb Williams at USC. He has the chance to start on the outside from day 1 for this team. He started the second preseason game on the outside over DJ Chark, over Quentin Johnston. DJ Chark now dealing with a hip injury. We don't know how much time he's going to miss, but that certainly helps Brenden Rice to further kind of make his case to be that guy. And look, I don't know if he's good. his production profile is certainly nothing to write home about. Seventh round wide receivers do not have good track records. But if you're telling me I can get a wide receiver for basically nothing, who is going to run a bunch of routes with Justin Herbert as his quarterback on a team with very little target competition, I think that's a player worth just sort of stashing and seeing what he is, right? Even if there's just a little bit of hype. If he has one good game and you can sell him for a second round pick, that's a huge win. And lastly, I'll touch on Johnny Wilson, who didn't play in preseason week 2 due to a concussion. So, not a ton of new information recently, but Johnny Wilson was having a great camp, getting some first team reps with Paris Campbell injured, seemed to have kind of the inside track to win the wide receiver 3 job for the Eagles. I think he still has that chance. I thought he was an interesting prospect. He did actually outplay Keon Coleman last year. He was a senior, but he did outplay Keon Coleman. And his junior year yards per outrun, just kind of a crazy stat, 3.36, was actually the third best single season yards per outrun of any wide receiver in this class. So he has flashed a little bit of upside. He's a massive wide receiver. I don't think there's a ton of upside in being the Eagles wide receiver 3 without an injury, but there's enough talent there. Like it's an intriguing enough player that I'm still willing to stash him and just see what happens. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. Hopefully that helps you catch up on some of at least the rookie related stuff from these first 2 weeks of NFL preseason. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you can catch all of the future Dynasty content, all of the NFL news and updates that we have here at Fantasy Points. And I will see you guys in the next one.